it's pretty clear that one of the features of kind of a modern sporting format is the concept of aggression, or sometimes aggression, right? It doesn't always happen, but aggression is kind of part of modern day sport. And when I talk about aggression in this particular video, I'm really talking, I think, about the idea of Parent's hostile destructive aggression. So I think I'm talking about hostile destructive aggression, what we might sort of relate to as violence, or trying to do someone else harm in a way that's way outside the rules of any particular activities. So this kind of theory-based lesson going to be based around that concept, not this notion of assertion or instrumental aggression so much. I might mention those things on occasion, but certainly this is what we're talking about. And I'm going to talk to you about four theories. I'm going to talk to you about instinct theory, which has some very interesting aspects to it, quite a traditional theory. I'm going to talk to you about social learning theory, which you should immediately recognize as the primary work of Albert Bandura. Still living as I write this, and one of the most important psychologists, probably the most important living psychologist. We're also going to talk about what's called the FAH, or the frustration aggression hypothesis, which is like a scapegoat. You take your frustration out on someone else kind of theory. And we're going to have a look at something called the ACH, the aggressive cue hypothesis. So they're the four we're going to have a look at. And I suppose there's two things for us to do with each of these theories, really. The first thing is to look at what are the characteristics of the theory, and in terms of explaining why this hostile destructiveness might occur in sporting environments. And the second thing we need to do is say, is that reasonable? Is that fair? Are there any criticisms of that? So we're going to have a look at those sort of ideas within this. So let's kind of jump straight in, right? And let's start to think about instinct theory. And first of all, we need to know that the primary contributor to instinct theory of aggression was a guy called Sigmund Freud. And I'm pretty confident that you would have a bit of an awareness of Freud. If you don't, I would highly recommend you go and read some things about him. Quite a spectacular character in the middle of the 20th century. Did some crazy, amazing things, came up with some crazy, amazing ideas, many of them which were very much internalized as fact and as truth, and subsequently have been kind of, to an extent discredited, not all of them. He came up with some really interesting personality theories, and this kind of fits sort of neatly into that. So Freud established, or really was the father of this instinct theory. And basically, the instinct theory of aggression says that aggression is part of our personality. If you like, it's part of our character. It's innate to us. I want to write that term in, actually. It's innate to us. So we already know from any kind of innate theory, that means that for us, that makes our whatever behaviour we're talking about, in this case aggression, it makes it stable. So it's something we'll do frequently, and we'll do in response in many occasions, and it makes it enduring. And by that we mean it's kind of like it's just how you are, and you can't change it. So Freud would have argued that aggression would have been an aspect of the human character, of the human persona, of the human personality. And his argument about this was, well, that must be the case, because back in the day when we were kind of adapting and moving through kind of evolution as an ape and beyond, and what did we need? We needed the idea of self-protection, and this was his idea at least. So we had to have the idea of self-protection, and perhaps beyond that we needed the capabilities of survival. And certainly Freud saw one of those survival instincts as being an ability to act aggressively towards other people who might threaten our survival. So he sees aggression in that light, that it's something which we can't really be blamed for. Well, actually, I don't suppose you would have ever said that, but it's not something which is totally within our control. It's just an aspect of our ancient biology, which is kind of interesting. But he also strongly related aggression with anger, that anger kind of naturally led to aggression. Anger was the trigger point of aggression, and we'll come back to that point with some of our subsequent theories. He also said that you can see this instinct theory on the sports field or in the sports arena, because you can see concepts of retaliation, that something has angered us or has frustrated us, and we will retaliate to that and perhaps act aggressively or even violently. So he said that that was kind of an example of where this kind of comes from. But look, not everything Freud said was useful. Probably was at the time, but certainly in reflective terms, we need to think about this instinct theory. Is this really a reasonable description of all human people. And we have to say no, don't